Welcome to the Wildcast, back again for another episode. We are on episode, I don't even know anymore. But what I do know is that it is the episode that we are going to rank centers in the NBA, the top 10 centers, in my opinion. So this list, I think, was a bit easier than the other ones, right? There was a lot less names in the power forward list. The power forward list had a lot of names on it, right? And that was a tough one to go through. But the centers list, I only had 13 names, 3 honorable mentions in the top 10 guys. Before we get into it, make sure to listen on all the audio platforms, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and then go over to YouTube for another audio if you want that. Get it all likes, rate it all highly, please. And yeah, let's get right into it. For the first honorable mention on the list, we have the man that got traded for 70,000 picks, Rudy Gobert. All right. Rudy Gobert, 70 games this season, 13 points, 11 boards. I mean, it was a good season from Rudy Gobert. Let's not say that. Let's not say it was a bad year. It was a below average year for him, but it still wasn't a bad year. The Timberwolves still are the top 15 defense in the league. Rudy Gobert was there to anchor that thing. 1.4 blocks per game, 1.4 blocks per game. He played a lot of games. He played 70 games. The thing that kills it here for me, I think, is just he underperformed for the value that he was at, right? When he got traded to Minnesota, we all know it was a package and a half, right? It was so many picks in that trade, and people really expected him to be that all-star defensive player of the year defender that he was. And you just didn't see it on the court. It was kind of underwhelming for him. The Timberwolves obviously didn't have great team success, but I think that part of it was a gelling period that they couldn't really figure out. Cat only played like 20-ish games, 30 games. So there wasn't really much to go off of when you came into the playoffs, and then we were having a big man, Rudy Gobert, and Cat trying to figure out how to play the four, and then how that spacing all worked, considering Rudy Gobert shot 0 threes this entire year. I think it was just, a weird gelling period for them. It was their first full season together. And I think that next year it could be better if they just figure out really how to make it all work. They just need a little bit more time. They need a little bit more game plan about how it's all going to work out. But I think there's a lot of steps to make it work, and I think Rudy Gobert had a decent season, but obviously it wasn't up to his standards. Next honorable mention would have to be Clint Capella. 12 points per game, 11 rebounds. And really, I don't really know what else to say about Clint Capella. He's 28 years old and he seems 36, right? The Hawks did not have a good defense this year. He did not play good defense this year. The Hawks are kind of just they're in shambles right now, right? We don't really know what's going on over there. We know that Trae Young's the point guard and Quinn Snyder's the coach. We don't know anything else about that team, right? DeJounte Murray, who knows what he even wants out of a team? Clint Capella, I've heard in so many trade rumors. They just shipped out John Collins to the Jazz. They got such a backup at that forward position. They have so many young guys to try to fit in. But I think Clint Capella still had a good year. It's just the matter of the fact that you never heard about Clint Capella or the Hawks really all year. He really wasn't. There was no impact there. Clint Capella put up the numbers, but 9 in and 9 out, it was just like what is it going towards? They were a 500 team. They didn't really play well in the play-in, and there just really wasn't much success. And I'm not saying it's Clint Capella's fault, but it might just be another thing like Timberwolves where they're just learning how to gel with a 2-point guard backcourt. Which moves us to our next honorable mention and the final honorable mention, which is Jonas Valanciunas, and I was really debating putting him in the top 10. Just because I didn't really know the numbers he had this season. I thought he had 14 points, 10 boards, and 2 assists, and he played 79 games. I personally did not know Jonas Valanciunas was like that. I did not know he was putting up these kind of numbers. It's a step down from last year because he played 6 less minutes per game. There was more of a backup at the center position over there in New Orleans. But I still think it was a very productive year for Jonas Valanciunas going into year 7, I believe. it's still what I would expect out of him, right? He's not really a championship center, you wouldn't think, but he'll be there night in and night out, obviously, and he'll give you a good amount of points and a good amount of boards, and he'll just be there. He'll be a reliable guy to play with. The Pelicans obviously were not a very good defensive team. Also, they were tied for 15th with the Timberwolves. But again, there was just really no success here. A lot of these middle-of-the-pack teams they're just kind of meshed together at some point, right? Because you don't really know who had the outstanding seasons and who didn't, because they're all just at around that 500 range. The Hawks fall into that category. Not the Hawks, the Pelicans. I apologize. Moving into the top 10. At the number 10 spot was the man that has just been traded to Portland, the Portland Trailblazers' new starting center, DeAndre Ayton. Now, me personally, I'm a very big Ayton guy. I like Ayton's game. I like watching him on the court. He has a fun game to watch. He can do a lot of things on the court as well. I mean, he's a well-rounded center. But the reason that he's at 10 for me was his attitude all season, right? You watched DeAndre Ayton all year, and it seemed like he didn't want to be there all year, and we all knew that he didn't want to be there. It wasn't really the system really didn't fit him, and the fact that he still averaged 18 and 10 in a situation that he didn't want to be in at all, like he wasn't having fun playing basketball. And for a former first overall pick, it's tough to see a guy come to this, right? He gets drafted to a place for the first overall pick to a franchise that really for the last couple of years, well, not recently, when he was drafted for the last couple of years, they weren't successful at all. So you really think he's going to come in and be like a second option to Devin Booker. And that's not at all what happened, obviously, because they got the star power in Kevin Durant. They got the star power in Chris Paul, and they have the star power in Devin Booker still. And he just kind of faded away, and he didn't like that role anymore. And I think that really just took his confidence down. Next season, I fully expect DeAndre Ayton to be a top 5 center, in my opinion. I think just seeing the little bit of like media day clips from DeAndre Ayton, he seems so much happy already just to be there and be in a new situation. I think fresh air can really do something to a player and really up his game. But I do think DeAndre Ayton can take that next step this season and really just hopefully find a situation that he enjoys and will start to regain the love of basketball that he had. But yeah, personally, I think that's why he's at number 10 for me. Moving on to number 9. This was a controversial one for me because when I do these rankings, right, I just look at the names and I just throw them all down randomly and I just go, like my first ranking is just straight off what I think looks the best. And Karl Anthony Towns, who's at number 9, was originally at number 5 for me. And I looked at his stats. I pulled up the basketball reference page. Karl Anthony Towns played 29 games this season. I looked at that and I bumped him down to 9 instantly. Like, it was just like that. 21 points per game, 8 boards, 5 assists. Great numbers from a guy who's never played power forward in his career. This is his first year playing power forward. And honestly, it's tough to be a 4 next to Rudy Gobert, right? Because there's no floor spacing. Cat has been an unconventional center, let's say, right? He's just a big guy who kind of plays like a guard, if we're being honest. Shoots a lot of threes. He likes the ball in his hands. He can create for himself. But being a 4 next to Rudy Gobert, I think is tough on the basketball court, just strictly because you're kind of butting heads with them at all times. And you really can't tell him to get out of the paint because he's not going to do anything once he's out of the paint. But I think Karl Anthony Towns still had a great season. In the playoffs, he had that really one great game against the Denver Nuggets to steal the one game that they did. But I think the only reason he's above DeAndre Ayton for me was because of the playoff performance that he had. I just think that the game that they took and Karl Anthony Towns showed his dominance there. It was really just like watching old Cat. And I think next year, again, like I said with Rudy Gobert, there's going to be a whole lot more fluidity, I think, to this because they're going to start figuring stuff out and they're going to start finding something that works and they're just going to keep going at it. But next year, Karl Anthony Towns will be in the power forward list if nothing changes with their lineup. So, I mean, we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, he's still in the center list because he's still listed as a center on Basketball Reference. So that's number 9, Karl Anthony Towns. Moving on to number 8. Now, I really wanted to put this guy higher just because I know what he can do, and I think a lot of people know what he can do. Like last season, his team was a top half defense, and this season it just wasn't the same. The player I'm talking about, of course, is Nikola Vucevic. Right, last season the Bulls were a top half defense. He really isn't a guy that you would expect to be the anchoring center of a top-tier defense. Last season, the Bulls were, of course, 12 in defensive rating. This year, they were 20th. It's a big step back, and I think Vucevic still put up good numbers. He put up 17, 11, and 3. He played all 82 games, which is impressive itself. But when I really took a step and looked back at it, all these guys above him, I think, just deserve it a little bit more, even though it kind of hurts because I want to see Nikola Vucevic succeed. I like his game. I like his story. I like the way he plays. But yeah, he falls at 8 for me, unfortunately. But moving on to number 7 on the list, we have the one, the only Miles Turner. I love Miles Turner's game, right? I love him as a center. Last season, before the D'Angelo Russell trade, when the Lakers were linked to a bunch of trades involving Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, I was really excited because I like Miles Turner. I like his game, and I think he would have fit well next to Anthony Davis. But this season in Indiana, it was his best year scoring. 18 points per game. He had 7 boards, 2.3 blocks per game. Miles Turner was really this was his best year by far in the league. Partly because of that is I think Tyrese Halliburton was spoon-feeding him all season, right? He was just getting easy buckets left and right. And I think for him specifically, his stat lines between last year and this year really shows the impact of having a top-tier point guard on your team, right? Last year he had 12 points per game. This year he had 18 points per game. And I just think that it really shows what a center can be if you get a point guard that will look for him every single time down the court, right? Because that's what Tyrese Halliburton does. He looks for the best pass possible. And a lot of the times it was Miles Turner, and he was just getting missed the last couple seasons. But I think having a great point guard on this team really elevates Miles Turner to another level. And next year, I'm really excited to see what he can do because this is just a stepping stool and a learning period because next year they can really put it all together and see what they can do as a team. Which brings me to number 6, which will be the one and only Jarrett Allen. Now, Jarrett Allen, I think, had a worse season personally, statistics-wise, at least, than Miles Turner. 14 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists. Only played 68 games, which is more than Miles Turner. But I think even though his stats don't look as good as Miles Turner's, the Cavaliers were the number 5 defense in the league. And that's okay. I'll say this. It's a lot attributed to Evan Mobley, who is obviously an all-defensive player. And a lot of it is also contributed to Jarrett Allen, right, who is also a great defender. But it's the team defense that Jarrett, the IQ is just there for him on defense. He knows where to be. He knows how to help. So, yeah, it's really not the stats that stand out for Jarrett Allen for me. It's obviously only his 4th year in the league. Next season, I don't really know what the Cavs can do with him, right? Because me personally, I said in the Power Forwards video, I'd like to see Evan Mobley run the 5. And that probably means that Jarrett Allen either gets moved to the bench or he gets moved on to a different team. I think that moving him to a different team and finding another piece that fits next to Evan Mobley better would be better, just overall as a look for the Cavs. But Jarrett Allen, I think if he does get traded, which I don't know if he will, I've heard a little bit of speculations behind it, right? Because they want to run Evan Mobley at the 5. They just have to figure out what to do with Jarrett Allen. And obviously a guy of his caliber is not going to come off the bench. So I think if you can find a trade for him, this new team, if he finds a place there, I think he can still put up the same amount of production. But really the reason why he's so high on my list, or higher than Miles Turner, I should say, was because of just the team defense and the IQ that he has on the defensive end. Top 5 defense with your anchoring center being Jarrett Allen. It's really impressive, and it's what won me over. Moving on to number 5 is Kristaps Porzingis, the man who looked like an entirely new player in Boston in the preseason. this guy looked absolutely insane. The first couple preseason games, he looked absolutely reborn. Like, people were saying all over Twitter, like, what is this? He was not doing this in New York. He was not doing this in Dallas. He was not doing this in Washington. But if we are talking about last season, which we are, Kristaps Porzingis with the Washington Wizards averages 23 points, 8 boards, 3 assists. Of course, the defense is a lot to be desired. He still averaged a block and a half per game, but I think most of that is just because that he's 7'3" and can just stand over half of the point guards in the league and just swat them. I think in Boston, I actually don't know what they're going to do because they still have Al Horford. I wouldn't be surprised if Kristaps ran the center and Al Horford kept playing power forward as he did all season. I also wouldn't be surprised if Al Horford played the 5 and Porzingis played the 4 because I know Porzingis also likes playing the 4. He's kind of like Anthony Davis. He likes playing the 4 because he doesn't like guarding the huge big centers like your Joel Embiid's, like your Nikola Jokic's. But I am really curious on what the Boston Celtics are going to look like with Kristaps Porzingis because this was a very good season last year for him scoring-wise, right? He had a lot of freedom on the Wizards. It was the highest scoring year he's ever had in the league, 23 points per game. 50% from the field, 38% from 3. And I really think that he's going to take that confidence that he had in Washington, getting the ball almost every single play, and he's going to bring it over to Boston. And I'm really excited to see it because if this Boston team can add another dimension for their scoring rather than just the Jays, it opens them up a whole lot. And I don't think the defense is really going to be a problem because you have Drew Holiday, you have Al Horford, who is still a good defender, and Kristaps Porzingis, he only looked bad last year because he was on the Wizards. He doesn't care. He's the type of player that really just, if he's not winning, if he's not competing, he's probably not going to give it his all on the defensive end. And he's really he's no slouch, right? He's averaged 2.5 blocks per game before. He averaged a block and a half last season. So I don't really think that the paint defense worry for the Celtics fans will be a problem at all, right? I think they will manage, and I think Kristaps Porzingis will be a good anchoring center for them. Moving on to number 4, because Porzingis was at 5. Number 4 is Bam Adebayo. Now, this is another guy, just like Karl-Anthony Towns, that I think deserved to be higher on this list. But again, I dove into the stats some more, and I realized that Bam Adebayo has had some flaws this season, right? 20 points per game, 9 rebounds, 3 assists is honestly a great year for Bam. He shot 8% from the field from 3. I mean, not 8% from the field, 8% from 3. He only had 0.2 attempts per game, so he really wasn't shooting it. This was the best scoring year for him personally. His defense did fall a little bit, but he still was second team all defense. Now, there's 2 things personally that put him at the number 4 spot and below the number 3 guy, who we'll get to in a bit. But the 2 reasons here are, A, the success they had in the regular season, right? 44 and 38, my bad. 44 and 38 they went this season. They were the 8th seed. They nearly lost in the play-in. They did make the finals, however, right? The Miami Heat were in the finals. But I think they could have done it if Bam showed up on offense every night, right? In the playoffs, Bam struggled on offense, and it looked like he was struggling. It looked like he was trying to find something that worked. You usually expect players to rise and play once they hit the playoffs, right? Bam dropped in almost every stat, which is something you really don't want to see. So that's reason number A why he's number 4 and not top 3 for me. Reason number 2 was the Miami Heat weren't a top 10 defense even. They were tied for 11th with 2 other teams. This is a team that prides themselves on their defensive play, Miami Heat culture, right? And they play physical basketball. They play high defensive basketball. And, of course, it might just be because Jimmy Butler played however many games. He played barely any games this season. But I still think that even with Bam as your center and the culture that they have and the play style that they have, that the 64 games of Jimmy Butler still in the regular season should be good enough to get you a top 10 defense at least. Like, this team is built to be a top 5 defense, and they were a top 5 defense. It looked like in the playoffs, at least. I don't know the specific playoff numbers of the rankings. But yes, the Miami Heat were a top 2 defense in the playoffs. But the fact that you don't do that all season is what gets under my skin. What makes me want to penalize you for that. So I mean, obviously in the playoffs as a team they showed up defensively. Also in the playoffs as Bam Adebayo himself, he did not show up offensively. So it kind of is a trade-off there for him. But he still had a great season, and he still is a great player, a top 5 center, and I have him at 4. I don't think you can put him. I don't think anybody who makes a ranking can put Bam out of the top 5. I just don't think it's possible. He's too good of a player to put outside of that range. But yeah, the guy that beat him out in the number 3 spot is Domantas Sabonis. The Sacramento Kings continue to dominate. Honestly, they had one of my most favorite seasons as an NBA fan, just because it's the Sacramento Kings, right? Nobody expects the Sacramento Kings to be the team that they are. They show up. They made the playoffs comfortably. They may have lost in the first round, but that series felt like an NBA Finals. That Warriors-Kings first-round series felt like an NBA Finals. There was so much intensity behind that. Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, they showed out all year. Domantas Sabonis, 79 games, 19 points, 12 boards, 7 assists. Dang near averaged a triple-double at center. That is just impressive, really. It was the second best year scoring for him as a personal player. He averaged 20 points a game in Indy one time. It was the highest assist year he had, highest rebounding year he had. It was just a career year for Domantas Sabonis. It was one of the best seasons in recent history for the Sacramento Kings. And he showed up in the playoffs. They might have lost, but that's just because the Warriors had an overwhelming team. But Sabonis was there. And obviously, I think it's super impressive that he's top 3 centers on my list personally, because everybody knows the top 2 that I'm about to say. Everybody knows the next 2 guys I'm about to say. But so you're really fighting for that 3 spot when you're coming outside of those 2 guys. But Domantas Sabonis really proved himself this season, and I'm very excited to see what he does next season, because they found success this year. And if it's one thing I know, it's that once you find success, you just build on that success and you keep doing what's succeeded. So I'm very excited for the Kings. I'm very excited for Domantas Sabonis, see what they can do next year. And of course, this brings us to the top 2 guys, the MVP and the Finals MVP. And no, Kai Jones is not on this list, despite his delusional talking on Twitter and all his celebrating for getting waived from the Hornets. And that guy's not there in the head, I don't think. But, of course, number 2, I think, in my personal opinion, is going to have to be Joel Embiid. Now, of course, this is the MVP of the league. And so it's kind of difficult to put somebody above the most valuable player. But I can't do it in my right mind. Jokic had way too good of a year to not be considered the best center in the league, right? Joel Embiid, no slouch at all. 33 points per game. I believe he was the scoring champ this season. I don't think anybody... he was the scoring champ this year. So it was an incredible season for Joel Embiid, right? 33 points, 10 boards, 4 assists. The 76ers were a top 3 defense in the league. So Joel Embiid was there. Joel Embiid was clearly the MVP in my opinion. He definitely earned it this year. I know a lot of people saying it was just tired out voters that didn't want to give it to Jokic again, so they gave it to Embiid. But I do think that Joel Embiid deserved it this year. It's just what killed it for me was the playoffs, right? You saw Joel Embiid go from this 33-point per game dominant score, and he dropped 10 points per game in the playoffs. He went down to 23 points per game, not even 10 boards. He averaged 9 boards. It was really just a sad showing from him in the playoffs. And I'm not blaming him entirely because it wasn't. There was a lot of turmoil in that locker room, I think. James Harden really, of course, we know now what's going on with him. We don't even know why if he's showing up or not, if he's going to show up, what his relationship is with the front office. But I don't think Joel Embiid, I don't think I can put him number 1 when you lose that much play come playoff time. I don't want to see, if I'm the general manager right now, I'm furious if my MVP player drops 10 points per game once we hit the playoffs, because the playoffs is what matter. The playoffs is where it counts, and you can't be dropping 10 points per game once you get there. You just can't. As for the number one guy on my list, it is officially Nikola Jokic at number one. 25 points per game, 12 boards, 9.8 assists. Almost had that triple-double. But what more can you say about this guy? Obviously, the regular season number was there, but the playoff numbers, 30 points per game, 13 rebounds, and 9 assists again. This is what you want to see, right? Nikola Jokic took a step back during the regular season. He just made the playoffs, and once it hit playoff time, he took his play to the next level and upped his numbers and upped his play. And it won him the championship, right? It won him the first championship in franchise history. And I think it's well-deserved that he won Finals MVP. Again, should he have won regular season MVP? I don't think so. I think Joel Embiid did deserve it. But Nikola Jokic is the best center in the league because of his improved play when it came to the time that matters. So, yeah, that's going to be the top 10 NBA centers list. Next week, we are finally done with rankings, right? All the position rankings are out the window. Next week, we're going to be going over the predictions from me for the regular season, playoff picture, all that prediction type stuff. To go over the rankings one more, honorable mentions were Rudy Gobert, Clint Capella, Jonas Valanciunas. At the number 10 spot, DeAndre Ayton. Number 9, Karl-Anthony Towns. Number 8, Nikola Vucevic. Number 7, Miles Turner. Number 6, Jared Allen. Number 5, Kristaps Porzingis. Number 4, Bam Adebayo. Number 3, Domantas Sabonis. Number 2, Joel Embiid. And number 1, Nikola Jokic, the Finals MVP. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Wildcast. And hey, back-to-back Fridays. Look at us. Again, listen to Spotify. Listen on Apple Podcasts. Go over to YouTube and listen there. Thank you for listening. I don't know when the next WCLS video will be out. I wanted to talk a little bit about preseason, but I don't know if there's enough to make a whole podcast episode about it. But we'll see. Again, that's going to be random. So as long as y'all listen on all the platforms, we will see you next week here. Peace.